Namaskar and welcome to the special presentation that we have put together to mark the birth anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the father of the Indian Renaissance, also as a run-up to marking his mega celebrations for his birth anniversary celebrations, 250th birth anniversary celebrations in the year 2022. In this very show, which is dedicated to the life and legacy of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, we have a very eminent panel on the national broadcaster. We're going to talk about the life and the times of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, his teachings, his contribution, his very rich legacy, and most importantly, why is Raja Ram Mohan Roy all the more relevant in today's India in the current socio context. And to do so, let me introduce our special panel on this special presentation. We are joined by Professor Hiraman Tiwari in our Delhi studio, Professor of History and Culture. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And we are extremely glad to have Kanchan Gupta, veteran journalist and distinguished fellow ORF, joining us on Skype from Greater Noida. Kanchan Gupta, thank you so much, sir, for joining us, and very honored to have also Jayarath Rao, author and entrepreneur, joining us all the way live from Mumbai. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Let me quickly, in fact, start with Kanchan Gupta. Overall, the big takeaways and the fact that we at National Broadcaster have put this presentation and program together to send across the message loud and clear that why is Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the legacy, his teachings, all the more relevant in today's India. Please open with your opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Sakal. I'm really delighted that Doordarshan has decided to honor Raja Ram Mohan Roy on his birth anniversary. Now, birth anniversaries and death anniversaries, they come and go every year, but this year it's different. This is the first birth anniversary that follows the Prime Minister's declaration late last year in Calcutta that India will celebrate Raja Ram Mohan Roy's 250th birth anniversary. The formal celebrations will begin next year, but this year, on his birth anniversary, it's a declaratory celebration where we will be declaring as a country, as a people, and as inheritors of the Indian Renaissance, our commitment to sort of relive the ideals that motivated Raja Ram Mohan Roy and sort of became the pillars of the reforms movement which he had initiated in his lifetime, and which in a sense were the core of the Indian Renaissance.
Absolutely. And let me quickly get in Professor Hiraman Tiwari here. And the fruits of that Indian Renaissance is what the generations, the forthcoming generations, especially in today's context, that we are living up. Especially, let's now pick up the relevant areas, the women empowerment. And I think it all started with this revolutionary thinking by the visionary leader like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, whether it is abolition of sati, practice of widow remarriage, etc.
Thank you, Sakal, for having me here, and I'm very grateful to be in the company of Kanchan Gupta. Kanchanda, as you know, is also the chairman of the Raja Ram Mohan Roy Foundation, and as he said, it is so important to remember our legends of the past. And he's not only the legend. Raja Ram Mohan Roy has done a million things to change how we think, how we do in our society. At that time, remember, in the early 19th century, he was born in this, I think, last quarter of 18th century. And what he did in that short period of time, he could not reach 60 and did so much. And as Kanchanda just said, that he revolutionized the thinking of India, how India thought about itself, how India thought about its traditions. And as you mentioned, one of the major things that he did was he was trying to remove certain what is called evils of the society, and one of them was the sati pratha. Now, it is solely his contribution that we managed to get rid of it. Not only that, as you also added, that he brought in and started the movement of widow remarriage. I will, of course, discuss how poignantly poised and placed Raja Ram Mohan Roy was at the time that he lived. He actually was preceded by
Yes.
great people, and he was followed by 4 giants of this country.
Yes.
And as we explore the possibilities of what happened, what
so
he
in many
did,
ways, let me also
we'll
get Mr.
see
Rao
what,
here.
what he
talk
really
here.
has done. Yes.
Absolutely. And as we speak, Mr. Rao, first intellectual reform movement is what he started. And the societies like Atmiya Sabha or Brahmo Samaj, at that point in time when lot was happening on a political front, especially the beginnings that he made when it comes to advocating equality of all religions, that was extremely significant.
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Rao.
think the argument that I have made, and which Kanchan has been very supportive of, is that Raja Ram Mohan Roy can be considered the father of what is called modern Indian conservatism. Because insofar as his social and political ideas were concerned, he went back to the well springs of Indian thought. He went back to the Upanishads. He went back to the original ideas of the Shanti Parva, and basically tried to bring forth that there was a political and social thought process in our country, which we could claim as our own, which was completely compatible with modern doctrines of the freedom of human beings, and as you rightly pointed out, gender equality and things like that. I think this is the great achievement, what I call the trick of political conservatism, that Ram Mohan Roy plays whenever the local pundits would come and oppose him, saying, no, sati is prescribed, he would always go back to an earlier text and say, no, it's not prescribed. So he had that intelligence, that sensitivity, and that unique gift to be able to make the connection between the past, present, and future, which is what good intellectuals, Renaissance people like him do.
In fact, Kanchan Gupta, you would quickly like to come in here. Upanishads, Vedas, and the kind of conviction he had at that point in time. If you could just elaborate a bit more, because what he was trying to also advocate in the society, that you don't have to look outside to get that confidence, because India was in many ways growing socially, politically, etc. But then your power, your faith, your conviction lies in your own Vedas and in your books.
You see, you have to contextualize Raja Ram Mohan Roy's thinking in the times he lived. That was in many ways a very bleak period in our history. And what he did was, he was, as Professor Hiraman Tiwari points out, he did not have too many years at his disposal. He did not live for too long. But at a very young age, he mastered, or he at least tried to master, India's traditional sources of knowledge, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and what he militated against was the orthodoxy which had come about based not on the foundational texts, but on deviations from the texts.
Correct.
And he also tried to bring about, his reforms exercise begins with militating against certain practices of the times.
Okay.
For instance, that the Upanishads were meant only for the ears of Brahmins. He said, no, this is knowledge. This knowledge is meant for everybody. And it is for everybody to learn from this knowledge, to draw from this knowledge, and to conserve it. And from there begins a long, steady struggle. And it was not an easy struggle. There were, his life had its own share of controversies, but controversies are a very natural part of any reformist agenda. Did he succeed? I think in his own time, he was, I mean, his success shone. The abolition of Sati Pratha was only one thing. What he also tried to bring about was a sense of equality, a sense of fraternity. He insisted that education is the biggest empowerment that can happen.
Yes.
He believed in education for all. He
Absolutely.
believed in emancipation of women, not emancipation in the sense of the Western modernist idea of emancipation, but emancipation again through our traditional sources, through our traditional resources, women's education, women's right to decide, to choice, to agency. He was talking about these things 200 years ago.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's the beauty of it, Professor Hiraban. Would you agree? Because what
Absolutely.
we're
I mean,
today celebrating as Nari Shakti, this was his vision so many centuries ago. He perhaps was much, much ahead of his times.
As Kanchanda said, he put it so succinctly. He lived at a time when the past was really heavily resting on him as a bleak time of his days. And let me tell you what he pointed out at the end. Education is another milestone that he achieved. He wanted to bring about a very modern system of education. And you remember one of the major things that he did, for which Bengal has been known for nearly 200 years. Now he established Hindu College, which later on became now Presidency University, Presidency College. And of course, there was a parallel across the road, Sanskrit College. It was a wonderful time in many ways, although the time, for example, he was followed.
Languages, since I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, from Persian to Sanskrit
Exactly.
to Arabic.
Arabic.
From
And
Indian
then,
art and culture to European history, and then
Yeah.
talking about French Revolution.
So in one way, he said the knowledge was empowerment for him, and which is why, whether it was knowledge for women, and knowledge for Indians. So he was followed by another giant, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Then you have Ghosh. Then you have Rabindranath Tagore. Then you have the ultimate wonderful person, that is Swami Vivekananda. Just imagine what these people did to the legacy that Raja Ram Mohan Roy left. Of course, as Kanchanda said, that there were shares of
That
controversies.
legacy also had, let me go to Mr. Rao also, that legacy also was deeply driven by this rationale, promoting that rationale at that point in time for scientific approach. So he was not just... Yes, go ahead.
You see, one of the things that Ram Mohan was particularly good at understanding, as Kanchan points out, is the bleak situation we were in. And he understood that British rule, however much later on it got criticized, at that particular juncture in Indian history, actually was a positive. It liberated us from a very cruel, despotic, Nawabi, Mughal dispensation in that part of the country. And it actually brought rationalism into the discourse. And Ram Mohan was, he loved the Upanishads, but he was willing to take knowledge from any part of the world. He not only learned Latin and Greek, he learned even Hebrew. He was willing to take knowledge from any part of the world, and he understood that the rational methodology that we were getting as an unintended maybe gift of British rule was in fact totally in consonance with our own older ancient traditions, rather than the recent accretions that had crept up. And he was able to bring this brilliant synthesis. The professor mentioned many names.
Yes.
I would also like to add one very important name, which is Bonke. I think Bonke
I was coming to that.
derived from Ram Mohan this idea that the Indo-Western encounter, which just happened to be midwifed by British rule, it could have been midwifed some other way, but that is an opportunity for India and to actually reach back and renew itself.
Okay.
That there is a providential opportunity, if we will, which is what Bonke argues in Anandaman.
And I'm very curious
I think
to know...
the seeds of that thought come directly from Ram Mohan.
Yes, and seeds of the thoughts of free speech and freedom of press. Since we have a veteran journalist, Kanchan Gupta, here, a little bit more about that, and that too coming at a time when India was a different India 200 years ago, Kanchan Gupta.
Yeah, I mean, you see, we were at that point of time, the press in India was very rudimentary. The concept of free speech was an unarticulated concept. But very few people know that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was a champion of free press.
Absolutely.
He was a champion of free expression of thoughts. He was a champion of free speech. Now, this did not go down well with the orthodoxy, and it didn't go down very well with India's rulers of the day. And yet he persisted, and he kept on pushing the line, and he stood by what he believed in. Now, which sort of brings me, why is he and his beliefs and his sort of the ideals he cherished, why are they so important today? They are important today because we really need, as a nation, we need to empower our people. Empowerment, the best empowerment, the lasting empowerment, and empowerment which then becomes sort of, passes on from one generation to another generation. And that empowerment comes from education.
Okay.
Education has to be something which is not just going to school or college or university.
Okay.
And as Jerry Rao pointed out, you draw from all sources, you draw from all over the world, and yet you remain anchored in your own traditions, your own values, and in your own civilizational history.
Yes.
And our civilizational history it is knowledge-based history. If you look at our texts, if you look at our
yes, absolutely.
The books that we have inherited, it's all about knowledge.
Yes.
And when Tagore said that, keep all the windows in your house open, a thought which was then repeated by Gandhi, and subsequently, enlightened minds around the world have believed in that, and we also believe in that today. After all, we are not producing everything that we have.
Absolutely.
For technology, we are shopping around, we are importing.
Okay.
We are buying,
Kanchan
we
Gupta,
are acquiring.
Yes.
And that is the acquisition which we should be celebrating.
And that's exactly why we at the National Broadcaster have put this special presentation together to celebrate the legacy of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Let me quickly, we are almost at the fag end of the show. I'm going to quickly take final remarks. Professor Hiraman, also your point, plus adding to that, the very postulates of the oldest and the largest democracy that India has known world over was actually, if you look at the legacy, was laid, the foundation was laid during the time and period of Raja Ram Mohan Roy?
Absolutely,
Yes?
absolutely. As Kanchanda just said, that this empowerment through knowledge, and of course, we don't have enough time, but what Raja Ram Mohan Roy did, as I said, was carried on. Even some of them were slightly carrying different kind of ideological approach. He established Brahmo Samaj. He established this movement called Unitary, which comes from the Upanishad. And as Kanchanda just mentioned, that keep the windows open, Tagore said, this is the line that Ram Mohan Roy would draw from the Vedas, Rig Veda, Ano Bhadraha Kritavo Yantu Vishwata. Let all the winds from all over come here. As the professor said, that you need to bring in from any side, any good thing that can enhance the scientific approach to our education, which is why he brought in English education in particular. And of course, he was not very comfortable when the Sanskrit college was established across the road to Hindu college, but that's a totally different history, because he thought that Sanskrit was already a language which was enriching the country. We need a different kind of language to understand scientifically, to be able to equip ourselves to communicate with the people, and the people who of course had come at that time in terms of missionaries and other teachers. This is a fascinating time. In Germany, the Upanishads, the Kalidasas, the Manusmriti is being studied, and Raja Ram Mohan Roy needed, and in fact he was very conscious of the fact that you need to inject a scientific temper to the studying of the text which Kanchanda just mentioned, and the text, our knowledge is very supreme, and which is why finally I would say he based his knowledge system and his movements around oneness, and that is coming from the Upanishads, which of course is the result of the Vedic teaching.
And a bit, Mr. Rao, coming to you, his global approach, it was just not that he was into Upanishads and Vedas and everything that the Indian civilization, the rich civilization had to offer, but then his keen interest in European politics and the way he keenly followed French Revolution.
Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. He was an interlocutor on behalf of India.
At that point in time, yes.
Talking to the rest of the world as an equal. He was friends with the Unitarians, a group of Christians who he was close to. He, by the way, at a time when people wouldn't, Hindus particularly, wouldn't travel across the seas, he said to hell with all that and went.
We'll try and reconnect with Mr. Rao, but then taking a cue from here, he in fact also traveled to UK as an ambassador of the
I lost you. Did I come back?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No problem.
So he went as an equal, and he spoke as an equal, and he had his own strong views on European revolutionary movement. Some of them he supported, his whole view was that we bring something to the table, you bring something to the table, and we need to put it together so that jointly we as human beings make progress. So he was the ultimate humanist, which is why he was such a great hit when he went to London. He was considered, hostesses in London would consider it an honor to have him as a guest. Their party became
fantastic.
a chamatkar event if Raja Ram Mohan Roy turned up. So that was the power of his persona.
I can also add,
and that too as an ambassador of the
I can
Mughal
also
Emperor
add what
at that
happened.
point.
He lived in Bristol, and I was so excited 30 years ago when I traveled from Oxford to Bristol to his, what is Samadhi, and they call it mausoleum or tomb, and it's such a grand place. Every September near his, every Sunday around his time of departure, the Bristol mayor and lots of people come and somehow worship and offer their prayers every year, even until today. So he is such a revered figure even in that part of the world.
It's not only
and
India,
in the
it's not only
cemetery
the Indian
near
context.
Bristol, of course, the memory 30 years ago is still fresh in my mind.
I think that's a very big point. In fact, let me have final comments from Kanchan Gupta. Kanchan, the fact that he is not celebrated back home, the fact that we are not only so proud of Raja Ram Mohan Roy's legacy, but the world is recognizing even him today and celebrating his contributions from 200 years ago. Final comments, Kanchan Gupta.
Yeah, very quickly. You see, I don't think it's very fair to say that he is not celebrated. Most educated Indians would have known of or heard of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Sadly, we haven't had the tradition of celebrating all our great heroes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The great minds who led from the front. So it was always very selective, and that's why I began by thanking the Prime Minister.
Yes.
That the Prime Minister has taken the initiative to raise the level of the celebrations of the 250th birth anniversary to a national level. After all, what was once known as the Bengal Renaissance is now known as the Indian Renaissance.
Absolutely.
And in New India, today's New India is also poised on the verge of a renaissance. We are on the verge of a social awakening. We are on the verge of an economic breakthrough. We are on the verge of political awakening, of cultural awakening.
Absolutely.
So it's all a build-up that is happening, and it's time we celebrated it. And
I would love to
would be to pay tribute to one of our foremost thinkers and the father of the Indian Renaissance.
Beautifully put,
just
final
one
words.
line, just one line. I know what
Two
Kanchan
lines, two
said
lines.
that he was such a giant intellectual, such a giant, so many things that he did. I sometimes feel like a kid if I were born and I was living around 1820s, 1810s, and in that century when things were happening. And as I mentioned, just imagine 60, 70 years after he went on, what Vivekananda did. He was speaking a very same language, same content in a way that revolutionized people, the youth, the mind. As he said, the knowledge is salvation for Indians as the West wanted knowledge as empowerment. That is the subtle distinction that Ram Mohan Roy had just sowed that seed. And what a Bengal, what Kolkata that time was. I mean, I always envy every Bengali living at that time also inheriting that culture. It's just too good.
Too good. Final line from you, Professor Hiraman, because we need to wrap up the show. I think the more you talk, the lesser it is about Raja Ram Mohan Roy.
No, see, as I said, that you talk about his idea, as many things were mentioned now. The way he wanted us, that is Indians, to study our past and to apply it in the modern context, as was mentioned by the professor, as Kanchanda said, that he did something which reverberates even 250 years later today in our mind. The moment I speak of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, one reads his letters, one reads his messages, one reads his debates, the hair stands on end. That is the kind of giant he was. So I do not believe that people do not celebrate him. People like us worship him because he was a bundle of wonderful knowledge and ideas in one person.
And not only we are celebrating him back home, like you just mentioned, he's recognized and acknowledged and celebrated
every year in Bristol, every year.
Yes, yes.
And that occasion in 1990, I was there in September, along with the Bristol mayor and at least 2 dozen Bengalis and 1 UP wala.
Can I just have 10 seconds?
Okay, sure, please go ahead. Yes, 10 seconds.
You see, in Bengali, that particular phase of history is referred to as Jagoran. In Hindi, it is Jagran. And in English, it is awakening.
Awakening, exactly.
And that is why it is very important to recall him, to remember him, and to celebrate his views, his ideas, his thoughts. You don't have to agree with all of them.
Okay.
But to celebrate the awakening needs to be celebrated, if only because India is on the verge of another awakening.
Yes.
And that awakening again
that comment from you is leaving all the other panelists, distinguished panelists, smiling, and I think that's the big message there. The awakening and the Jagaran stays, it continues to live with us, the modern India. As we recall the father of Indian Renaissance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, many, many thanks. Kanchan Gupta, senior journalist and distinguished fellow ORF. Also, Jayatithi Rao, author and entrepreneur. Many thanks, Rao sir, for joining us, and also Hiraman Tiwari. Very glad to have you on our show, Professor History and Culture. And with that, from the entire team of Doordarshan, thank you very much, viewers, for staying with us on this special presentation. Namaskar.